Coyotes, your daily podcast on the Arizona Coyotes, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Tuesday, September 28th here on the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Robyn, Leaño, and Pavlock with you here today to discuss lots of things Arizona Coyotes. The first preseason game yesterday, Coyotes win 2-1 over the Los Angeles Kings. We'll talk about that game on today's episode, as well as other news regarding former Arizona Coyotes players. All of that on today's episode of Locked On Coyotes. For those of you who are tuning in for the first time, let us introduce ourselves. Once again, I am Robyn Leaño. I am, I've been covering the Arizona Coyotes for about 5-6 years or so. Been with the Five for Howling website of the SB Nation network, mainly covering the Tucson Roadrunners. I live down in Tucson, so I've been covering them. I've been watching a lot of the future of the Arizona Coyotes, and now coming into my second season as host of the Locked On Coyotes podcast.
And I'm Pavlock. I've been the managing editor for Five for Howling for a couple of years now. Before that, I was just a writer for Five for Howling. Been talking about the Coyotes for a long time and stepping forward into this new medium.
Yeah, podcasting is fun. I think like you and I were actually we're part of a podcast before, and I think we had a good time, and that's what brought us together here on the Locked On Network, and we're super excited to be with you all here today. But let's go ahead and get things started on today's episode, Carl. The Arizona Coyotes had a 2-1 preseason win over the Los Angeles Kings, and a lot of people have a lot to dissect out of this game.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an interesting game. It's the first preseason game, so you never want to, dig in too deep. I think I said yesterday that preseason games don't matter unless you win, in which case they matter a lot. But yeah, it gave us a chance to see some kind of interesting Coyotes pairings. We get a little bit better of an idea of how the team is going to be playing and who the personnel are going to be. And it was a win, and even meaningless wins, they mean something. It was fun to win.
It was fun to win. I think especially because we got a chance to see some players and how they might perform on a game situation. It's because some of these players we haven't seen in game situations. Obviously, we've seen some of the prospects already from rookie tournament, but other people, some of the veterans that are on the Coyotes ice for the first time, including someone like Louis Eriksson and Andrew Ladd and Shane Gostisbehere. They got a chance to see them skate for the first time in Arizona Coyotes uniforms. And that's, I think, the most important part about the first game in the preseason.
Yeah, I would say it's definitely we didn't see the entire lineup. There was a few notable names that were missing, but at one point we saw a power play that was Eriksson, Schmaltz, Gunther, Fischer, and Gostisbehere, and I tweeted out I could see this being the second unit power play for the Coyotes, especially for the first couple games when Gunther's still around. You definitely you're not seeing the full scope, but you're seeing little pieces of how the lineup's going to fit together. And I think that's always a very exciting aspect of preseason. I say see, and that's maybe a bit of a misrepresentation, since yesterday's game was radio only. I didn't get to actually see these players, which was a bit disappointing. I do hope the Coyotes eventually start just showing all their preseason games, but hearing the players, hearing the plays, that's definitely something where I've been following hockey for a long time. I've gotten used to listening to games and kind of visualizing it from there.
I mean, especially if you have a good radio play-by-play person, if you're not at the game, that person should be able to paint the picture for you that you can actually see it without seing it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. And it's definitely, there are a wide variety of radio people. I do like Bob Heathouse. I'm used to kind of how he paints the scene. He definitely I had Twitter up and the Coyotes page, so I was seeing like the on ice representations that way as well. But I definitely got a good idea of kind of what was happening and when the things were going good for the Coyotes, when things were going rough, when the game started to get a little bit chippy because it's the Coyotes and the Kings. There was definitely some pushing and shoving going on.
One thing I'm glad about, I think I mentioned this in yesterday's episode. I'm just glad that in preseason the Coyotes can still continue with games against Pacific Division rivals, just because.
Yeah.
I mean, because that makes more sense, right?
It does. It's very annoying that the Coyotes are going to the Central. I think everyone has kind of like pointed out, like, why don't we just move Calgary and Edmonton to the Central, and then we can keep the Coyotes in the Pacific, where it makes sense. But yeah, I like that we played the Kings for the first game. I like that the game got chippy. I like that there's like still this sense of rivalry between these two cities and these two teams, even if they're not in the same division. Like that's a real rivalry, not like the forced Vancouver Seattle rivalry they're gonna try and slam down our throats.
I mean, let's also be real. Like for the longest time, a lot of people were talking about Vegas and Arizona trying to be rivals, and well, that didn't really end up panning out as a lot of us hoped.
Yeah, I think there was definitely the groundwork for that. If they had like been on the same level as teams,
Yeah.
like skill wise, and like actually met in the playoffs, like I think we would have definitely seen more of a Coyotes Vegas rivalry building up. But just it didn't happen, and the timing just wasn't right for the few seasons that the Golden Knights have existed. Like it's still young. I imagine, maybe when the Coyotes rebuild ends, if Vegas is still competitive, we can maybe get something like that going because we're still going to meet in the Western Conference playoffs. But you know, I can see your point about like the Coyotes Golden Knights rivalry never really had a chance to fully form.
Yeah. Another thing that I'm really looking at is just again overall how certain position groups are playing out from this first game. And again, it is the first game. You don't want to overanalyze this stuff. But at the same time, we're podcasters, we're sports people. Naturally, we're gonna overanalyze this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, there are going to be 20 decisions made between like now and when the Coyotes finally take the ice. So, like, I don't want to go like, singing the praises of, let's just go, Unique. Since I thought he sounded like he had a pretty decent game, but he's more likely to be in the Tucson Roadrunners next season. So we don't want to, set expectations too high, but there's definitely like small nuggets of like, that's really cool. I like that they're trying that. And there are going to be some things that from the first preseason game to the end of the season are going to be there. So it's kind of our job to figure out what is meaningful and what is meaningless about these kind of preseasons.
Yeah, that's definitely the stuff that we're gonna have to see as things continue. Trying to think anything else that we should do in this, at least in this first segment, and just the basis thing. We're gonna, I think, next segment we'll go a little more in depth. We're talking about some players more specifically, but there were. I mean, like I was watching, like I think I saw this stat thing on line pairings, and they were and they're showing how effective it worked for a preseason game. And well, I mean, to me, it seemed like everything panned out correctly. Like, obviously, a win is a win.
Yeah, I will say that before we go into a little bit more in depth, something I've noticed that I'm not really sure how to feel about it yet, because we do see this a lot, is there's just been a whole lot of penalties taken by the Coyotes, and I can't tell if it's like the team playing with a more physical edge or getting beat and needing to take penalties. I know at least one instance we know that the league is trying to crack down on cross-checking, so they're probably going to be calling that really severely for the preseason to make sure the players get used to it. But I will hope that the Coyotes eventually start taking fewer penalties because, oh boy, that's been going all the way back to the to the rookie face-off tournament. They have been a heavily penalized team so far in this very, very, very short start to the season.
One last thing I'll point out is I've been looking through stat sheets, and those advanced stat sheets that people like to put out, and it just shows how you still have have another problem: possession.
Yeah.
It's gonna continue to happen. I think the Corsi 4 was significantly in favor of Los Angeles, which is not great. I mean, it kind of doesn't matter if you still win, but still, possession is a huge thing. This is preseason, and yeah, you got lucky that you had you had a good back end, but
the teams that possess the puck tend to win more. I think that's a very uncontroversial statement at this point. Like every game, like you could win a single game with no possession, provided you get very lucky and have like a good goaltender. I do not think the Coyotes are going to win a lot of games this season, so it makes sense that their possession numbers are so off. I also don't think they have the quality of goaltender needed to like keep winning in games where they're being like outpossessed or outplayed. So that one I can see going for the regular season, and pretty much up until the end, I think the Coyotes are not going to be a good possession team.
Absolutely. I mean, these are things that we're still going to have to keep track of as preseason goes and see how things goes. Because again, this game was significantly different than what we were going to see in the regular season. That's for darn sure. But let's start getting a little more in depth. We're going to get to that in just a sec. But first, I want to tell you guys about Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's now impossible to stock all the parts that your car will need at a typical auto parts store. So why endure offer pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning as your Odyssey an LX or an EX? We're waiting for the person behind the counter to order the part on their computer, choosing only the parts that their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership when you can go to Rock Auto, a family business that's been serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years, because they have something absolutely for everything: brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, and even new carpet. And I tell you guys, every freaking time I tell you about Rock Auto, I love checking the website to see what new parts I can get for my Mustang, whether it be my air filter or my cabin air filter or spark plugs, anything of those things that I need, that I need to keep my maintenance up to par. And Rock Auto has it. It's absolutely amazing, and it's become my place to go to. And I want it to be your place to go. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. And while you're there, write Locked On in their "How did you hear about us" box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com.
Does this sound familiar? You've got one device that lets you catch up on the game live, another that lets you stream your favorite shows, you're watching sports highlights on your phone, and you've got your neighbor's best friend's login for the good stuff. Well, I want to tell you about a simple way to get all that entertainment you love without the hassle, and a great way to finally get your TV together. It's called DirecTV Stream, and it brings your live TV and on-demand favorites together like never before, so you can watch your favorite sports, movies, and shows all in one place. That means no more juggling remotes and no need to buy another device ever again. And the best part? There's no annual contract. So get rid of the clutter and the confusion and get your TV together with DirecTV Stream. You can learn more at directv.com. That's directv.com. Compatible device required. Content varies by package.
All right, Carl, let's go ahead and get to the next bit of things. Let's go a little bit more in depth on this preseason game and things that a lot of people they really liked. One of the things that Andre Tourné seemed to really like, as well as everybody else of the Coyotes media, is goaltending. I mean, are we really surprised based off we're talking about goaltending and goaltending coach and how development from these from the goaltender development coaches are really doing something for these guys.
Yeah. And I think goaltending was also the area where fans and coaching probably had the lowest expectations, just because when you're the Coyotes and you give up your star goaltending for picks and prospects and you bring in some people and they play well, that's just kind of a bonus for you. And yeah, we definitely got some solid goaltending from both parties. Thornton played the final period, and Kashinash played the first two.
Yeah, I'm looking at this. It says Kajanash had a 8.99 save percentage, 317 goals against average. He was with the Sharks last year. But he like, I mean, that's not terrible. I mean, that's not good, but I
Yeah.
mean, in this preseason game, like the way he played, look, looking what is so 18 of 19 shots through the first two periods.
Sure. And I mean, it definitely sounded like he had to make some big saves to keep the team in the game, which is really all that you can expect from a goaltender. Just kind of keeps you in, makes the saves that they need to make, and then it's really up to the rest of the team to score. And the Coyotes were able to get two, but their goaltending kept them competitive, and yeah, that's great. I think myself and a lot of people are just like we don't even know who's going to be the starter for the Coyotes, if they're going to if it's going to be one of the people on the team now or if they're going to try and acquire someone. But if things are working out in preseason, that's good. Maybe they don't need to bring in someone else. Maybe Kozhanov is fine with being like the backup or even the starter for the Coyotes this year.
Kojanash is the starter. Oh God, I can only imagine what it's going to look like. I mean, because
Yeah,
remember, they still have Carter Hutton. We haven't seen him yet.
we haven't seen Carter Hutton. We didn't see a lot of people. I know Jacob Chikrin and Clayton Keller are two big names that didn't play last night. We also didn't get a chance to see Connor Timmins, who I'm very excited to see. Hopefully in the next game.
Yeah. Next, for those who want to know, next game tomorrow, and that's against the Anaheim Ducks. So that will be. We'll talk about that on. We'll give you a little preview for that on tomorrow's episode, as well as do as much as we can to keep things going here. But go ahead.
I was gonna say, just kind of sticking with a player that's been unexpectedly surprising. I would say Andrew Ladd
Oh
is
yeah.
the big name. I think before I was brought in as co-host, we were talking this offseason about is he even gonna suit up for the Coyotes? He not only suit up for the first preseason game, he got into a fight, which
Yeah.
if we're expecting Ladd to be I'm not up for this. Like, you're not expecting him to drop the gloves his first preseason game against a very young Kings player. That was definitely a surprise to kind of see.
Yeah, no, that's a huge thing from Angela because again, and just like you said, we weren't expecting him to suit up at all. We're just like, oh, he is the example of a dead contract that we're just picking up for picks, a lot of picks, and all of a sudden I just hear his name. I hear his name. I'm like, oh, there he is.
Yeah. And again, I didn't get a chance to watch, but you do notice when a name keeps getting brought up, they're clearly playing a lot. And Ladd finished fairly well, I would say. That was kind of the impression that I got from him. He wore an A for the Coyotes, and did kind of make me wonder, is he going to wear a letter this upcoming season? Is it yeah, you're not the skilled guy anymore. You're not going to be scoring all the goals for the Coyotes, but
You're a
you have the
team leader.
leadership.
Yeah,
Yeah, you've been here before. You've been like God, I would say he's one of the longer tenured NHL players. Maybe he's the guy to be the voice in the locker room, and that's why they brought him in. Just a pleasant surprise that Ladd was as competitive as he was.
Speaking of leadership, I don't think there's going to be a true C. I think they're going to have 4 A's or something like that this year.
I mean, it definitely makes sense. When the Coyotes did that under Tocchet for the first year, I it it definitely seemed like it was a gimmick more than anything, especially with the rumor being brought in that Oliver Ekman-Larsson was going to be named captain, which he eventually was. It felt like Tocchet was just kind of delaying the inevitable with that one, but for the Coyotes this year, with so many veterans who are on expiring contracts, you're like, yeah, maybe we'll just give you guys A's because you know what to do, and you're not going to be here next year. But so we don't want to, add that captaincy, that weight to it. But yeah, I'm sure like guys like Ladd, Erickson, Roussel, they're going to be able to add a lot to that room.
One last thing that I want to talk about when it comes to the what really stood out to the preseason, at least for me, Dylan Guenther.
Dylan Guenther.
He scored the game-winning goal, and it seems to me he really wants that opening day roster spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think he may be a little bit sore that he dropped so far in the draft, and now he's like, you know what? I'm gonna show 8 teams that they made a mistake in not drafting me. And he has been a consistent goal scorer for the Coyotes this very short preseason. He looked great in the scrimmage. He looked good in the rookie faceoff tournament, and he added a goal in his first preseason game. So, yeah, it's going to be very difficult for the team to decide to send Guenther back, and it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, here's the one thing I'll mention about that, and this was a discussion I was having with other hosts, and Dylan Guenther was supposed to go like somewhere between like 5 to 8. That's around where his draft stock was, but the Anaheim Ducks happened to make a interesting call at their pick, which completely throws a wrench through the rest of the top 10. And I mean, and then eventually, Dylan Guenther just starts to fall, which is interesting.
I mean, we saw it Jacob Chikrin's draft year. Like he was, I think, like speculated to go extremely high. He was called the top defensive prospect by a lot of people, and he ended up falling to the Coyotes 16th overall, I want to say, on that pick they got from the Red Wings. And with last year's draft being what it was, with a weird COVID affected season that just destroyed a lot of junior like seasons. I wasn't too surprised to see a player like Guenther like fall the way he did. I think it's definitely going to be a decision that a lot of teams regret, and that the Coyotes are going to be like, yeah, we got Dylan Guenther, and he was the start of the rebuild. Maybe I don't want to give too much hype to him since it's been a rookie face-off tournament and a preseason game, but he is looking really good to start off, and that's great for the team like the Coyotes that are rebuilding.
Yeah, you don't want to give too much hope to a lot of these Coyotes fans listening, but you also want to give them hope, and I think that's why we're trying to hype them up to the appropriate levels.
Yeah, and it's always like, I think the Coyotes have had a history of busts and overhyped prospects, so fans tend to be wary of anyone who's talking too much good stuff. Um, and I really don't want to like do that with Guenther. I don't want to overhype him, uh, but he looks good, and the stories have been about him so far because he is making the stories about him. I think Hayton had a very good game as well, but he didn't kind of establish himself as that, that bright spot that fans are looking for. And there's still plenty of time, but Guenther is definitely a very unusual case for the Coyotes, and unusual in the best way.
I mean, I think the thing is, I think it's because the player type that the Coyotes got out of Guenther. Because you talk about some of the previous, prospects, high level prospects they had, and yes, I'm looking at Stroman, Merkley, and those guys that never ended up really seeing the light of day. And like they were more like playmakers. They were around there. Dylan Guenther, like he was touted as a true goal scorer, like a physical presence, true goal scorer. He's gonna like you're gonna know he's on the ice.
Yeah. And he has had a phenomenal shot, which is just glorious to watch. I think the last real goal scorer the Coyotes had was redeemed Verbata. Um, and no offense to Verbata, I think he was a phenomenal player. I wish he could have retired as a Coyote. I didn't necessarily like the way the team treated him in his final years, but he wasn't like the kind of goal scorer that I think Gunther is going to be. I think he's going to be a much better player. Um, there's still plenty of time to watch that happen, and I'm excited to kind of see what he can do. I will definitely be keeping up with all the preseason games no matter what, but like Gunther is going to be one of those players where it's like, the team's probably not going to do very well this game, but maybe I could see a highlight reel Gunther play.
If there's a game, if there's a player like a prospect that's going to be in every single one of these preseason games, it's going to be Gunther.
Yeah,
They're going to test this guy.
they are, because it's a very difficult decision that they're going to have to make with his development. And I trust the Coyotes are going to make the right call on this. I think they have brought in people who know how to develop younger players, but Dylan Gunther is going to make it really tough to send him back to juniors.
Absolutely. We still got one last thing to get to, though. Kind of went a little bit long on this preseason talk. But once again, just a quick reminder that the next game is tomorrow against the Anaheim Ducks. We will preview that on the next episode. But since we still got one segment left, we will talk about what's going on with some former Coyotes players. And this is a pretty big one, something that some of you guys might be following. Before we get to that, though, I want to remind you guys that we're back and better than ever. All eyes are back on the gridiron as teams are back on the to start another football season. As always, BetOnline is your number one spot for all the pro and college football action this season. With the new updated site interface, even more odds, props, and contests, BetOnline continues to be the number one source for everything football. Head to the website, use your mobile device, sign up for a free account today, and receive your 100% welcome bonus. That is double your initial deposit just for signing up. Don't forget to use that promo code NFL100. From football, basketball, boxing, including hockey, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games. Don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. All right, Carl. Last thing to talk about on this Locked On Coyotes podcast, and we'll keep this short because we are running a little bit long. But it is a really important thing to talk about, and it is regarding former Coyotes player Jalen Smereck, who has been getting a lot of, unfortunately, racist comments while playing over in the Ukrainian league, and it's just not fun to hear about that.
No, it's I don't think anyone was necessarily surprised to hear that there was racism happening in the European leagues. It's kind of a story that we get a lot. If you are the type of player or a person who likes to forget those stories, it's very easy to, because they tend to occur like during off seasons or like sporadically. But if you pay attention, like this was a consistent issue that we see a lot. What happened was over the weekend, a player from a team that I'm not even going to try and pronounce because I do not speak Ukrainian, made a gesture that he was peeling and eating a banana at Jalen, which is just a very unfortunate thing. It's connects to a long history of associating Black people with monkeys. It's something that I see a lot when it comes to racism in European leagues. Like bananas are a very consistent thing, and I think each player tends to each country has their own little racist quirks, and that's a European one that we see a lot.
Yeah. This player, I'm reading, he was like from that, that specific game where this actually happened. He was ejected.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously the Ukrainian Hockey League, the UHL, it is making good plays for it. I'm looking at it. It says on here that the general manager Eugene Korshev made a comment saying that there is no place for racism in Ukrainian professional hockey, and that they'll follow a disciplinary committee's investigation into a case of racist abuse. Which, I mean, it shows there's progress being made, but unfortunately, the thing is, Jalen Smereck just made a post this morning saying that he will be taking a leave of absence from his team and will not be playing any future games until this player is essentially no longer playing.
Yeah. How he describes it is suspended and removed from the league. And it's always kind of difficult to know, like, what exactly can happen in a situation like this, like what leagues can get involved. But we live in 2021 now. You cannot be a professional player who is making a racist gesture on the ice. You shouldn't be a professional player doing anything racist off the ice either, but on the ice just cannot be done. There are cameras recording everything you do. There are very few jobs where you're allowed to be openly racist in front of the world. And that's just something that people are going to need to like learn and deal with. And I agree with Jalen here. The players should not be allowed to play another game in that league.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing, especially if making a gesture like that, because like again, that's like stuff like that. It's just not. Again, we're all about inclusivity in the hockey world, and like if you make someone feel that freaking uncomfortable, like what are you even doing?
Yeah, especially for a player who wears a letter. Like it's not necessarily that something that hockey has to deal with as much, but if you are doing something like that and like next game your team goes out and acquires a black player, like that's going to mess up everything because that person's going to come in with like a really accurate and bad opinion of you. And you can't have that in a team where you need to be working together. Like, there's no place for racism in hockey, mostly because racism is terrible and there's no place for it in society, but it's going to make your team worse because, like, no one's going to want to
It's
be
gonna
on a
break
team with a
locker
racist.
room morale.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I know like it's a game and like you can't go after your own player during the heat of the moment, but I could say like if I was on that team and I saw someone doing something racist, I'd be like, go get him, like take him out. I'll take him out after the game, but for right now on the ice, you go because you're not allowed to fight your own teammates.
Absolutely. One of the things I'm looking at here too. I'm just reading some of the news articles about this. Smereck is getting some vocal support from people over here in the States, obviously, because people are definitely a lot better here. There's still problems here in the States that should be addressed. But former NHL player JT Brown and now Seattle Kraken analyst went to make a public statement too, saying that like that he absolutely admires Smereck and that all stuff like that that he shouldn't have to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah, and he really shouldn't. I do remember Smereck's time with the Roadrunners. I didn't get a chance to see him play too much. He definitely was a very he seemed to be a solid defenseman, and I was kind of interesting to see how he develops now that he's playing in Europe. Not really going to get that chance, but he shouldn't have to deal with this in his job. He shouldn't have to deal with this in his personal life either. But like it's his job. I think we all have jobs and some of them aren't exactly where we would like to be. I'm sure he would rather be in the NHL than playing in the Ukrainian league and just like having to deal with like just an extra thing on top of that. And I'm sure he's also having to deal with a whole bunch of other shit fallout from this too. Like I think that's part of the thing that sucks. Like not only did he have like another player like do something racist at him, just knowing the world as it is, he's probably also having to deal with a bunch of racist fans who are going after him saying like the other guy did nothing wrong, or it was the heat of the moment, or I saw a large number of people being like, what's the big deal? I don't get it. And it's like, you have to actively be trying not to understand the world if you do not understand the problem with what happened.
Exactly. And that goes for every little bit of intolerance in the hockey world. Racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, any of that. Like let's just not do that.
Yeah. And let's also not pretend that this player like woke up one day and decided that for the first time in his life he's gonna do something racist, because it's never that. We
No,
know that.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure every single guy on his team looked at him and like, oh, that really explains that thing that the guy said like to me 3 months ago, or that thing he did at that restaurant that one time. There were signs, and I think as a sport, hockey needs to be better at like catching these things earlier, because no one just wakes up one day and decides to be racist on the ice. There's always signs. There's always someone who could have said like to took him aside earlier and been like, hey, you need to stop. Like what you're doing is not right, and it's gonna get you in trouble soon.
Absolutely. And we've seen this in the NHL too, unfortunately, and there's still problems with that.
Yeah.
But we'll have to see what I guess how things develop. And again, I hope Smereck can get his playing career and continue his playing career and not have to worry about this.
Yeah. It's still very early, and I think it's being seen as a test for like a lot of kind of the European leagues, a lot of international hockey. It's like, how are we going to deal with something like this? Because it is a big thing. Like anytime something happens on ice, there's going to be video of it, and I think we've all learned that if there's video, you have to deal with it. You can't just ignore it. And I mean, kudos for them. They seem to be saying the right things at this point, that they're going to take this seriously. Let's see if they actually do.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't think I put up my kudos to the UHL as well, that they're actually taking this seriously. So that's a good thing for going on over there. But I think that just wraps things up here on this episode of Locked On Coyotes. Once again, thanks to everyone for joining us on this episode. We really appreciate you taking this listen. Really appreciate you being a fan of the Locked On Coyotes podcast. Once again, we are available everywhere you get your podcast now, including YouTube. And I'm glad to be on YouTube, guys. Once again, I couldn't thank you guys enough because of your loyalty and your support that we're able to make it to YouTube and bring you these now new video podcast episodes as well. Don't forget to subscribe anywhere else though, because Spotify, Google, Apple, any place like that. Interact with us on social media at @LO_Coyotes. Ask a question, DM us. Maybe we'll answer them right back or on a future episode of the podcast. I'm personally at Robyn1. Carl Pavlock is at Carl Pavlock FFH. And Carl, if you have anything else that you want to close off, maybe comments you want to say as we wrap up this episode.
I would say just follow us. You could also follow 5. That's spelled out, then the number 4, and then the word howling for 5 for howling. The preseason's getting started, and we're going to be having a lot up there for you guys.
Absolutely. Once again, thanks everyone for listening to this episode. Hope you guys are staying safe out there. Hope you guys are staying healthy. And don't forget to howl on.